The unfolding dynamics between Africa and the United States have entered a new chapter, one marked by sharp confrontation, competing visions of sovereignty, and the reemergence of debates that date back to the colonial era. The announcement of a new travel ban by Washington targeting 16 West African countries has sent shockwaves across the African continent and beyond. This ban, framed by the U.S. administration as a matter of national security, has been met with fierce opposition by Burkina Faso's leader, Ibrahim Traoré, who has become the most vocal figure in condemning what he describes as an act of hostility and disrespect against Africa's independence. His words carry weight not just within his nation, but across the broader region, where resentment over the unequal balance of power between Africa and the West has been simmering for decades. The travel ban is not merely a technical adjustment in foreign policy. It is a symbolic strike that undermines the bonds of exchange, education, business, and family connections between Africa and the United States. For millions of Africans, the ban represents a denial of opportunity, a reinforcement of exclusion, and a reminder of the vulnerability that comes with reliance on external powers. For the American political establishment, it is defended as a protective measure against instability, trafficking, and alleged security concerns. Yet behind the rhetoric lies a deeper contest over influence, trust, and the role Africa should play in a multipolar world order. Ibrahim Traoré, the young and defiant leader of Burkina Faso, has chosen to confront this issue head-on. His opposition to the policy is not merely a matter of defending Burkina Faso's pride, it is a statement about Africa's right to stand on equal footing with the global powers that have long dictated the terms of engagement. In speeches and diplomatic interventions, Traoré has described the U.S. decision as an attempt to fracture Africa's unity, to punish nations that have dared to seek autonomy, and to reassert dominance at a time when Africa is beginning to diversify its alliances with Asia, the Middle East, and other regions. To understand the magnitude of this clash, it is important to examine the historical trajectory of U.S.-Africa relations. The United States has long oscillated between periods of engagement and withdrawal on the continent. During the Cold War, Africa became a battleground for proxy influence, with Washington supporting regimes that aligned with its interests while opposing movements that leaned toward socialism or Soviet alliances. After the Cold War, Washington's policies shifted toward conditional partnerships, promoting aid programs tied to governance standards, but always within a framework that preserved American leverage. In recent decades, programs such as the African Growth and Opportunity Act created trade pathways, while U.S. investment in health initiatives helped combat epidemics. Yet alongside these positives, there has been an enduring undercurrent of suspicion, unilateralism, and at times outright exclusionary practices. The travel ban intensifies these contradictions. 16 West African countries, each with unique histories, demographics, and strategic importance, now face restrictions that limit visas, educational exchanges, and even business travel. For many young Africans, this is not simply a diplomatic policy. It is a personal blow. Students who dreamed of studying in American universities now face rejection. Families who have relatives in the diaspora find themselves cut off from reunification. Entrepreneurs seeking to expand their businesses across continents encounter closed doors. This sense of exclusion is amplified by the global context, where Africa is increasingly sought after by powers such as China, Russia, Turkey, and the Gulf states, all of whom present themselves as partners rather than gatekeepers. Traoré's defiance comes at a time when Africa is reassessing its place in the global order. For decades, African leaders approached the West with caution, often avoiding direct confrontations. But Traoré belongs to a new generation of leaders who are less afraid to challenge the status quo, who speak openly of exploitation, and who demand respect for Africa's choices. His rejection of the U.S. travel ban has resonated deeply, not only in Burkina Faso, but across Africa, where many citizens see in him a voice that articulates their frustrations. His words cut sharply when he argues that the ban is not about security but about control, about punishing Africa for daring to imagine a future outside of Western dominance. The question, however, is whether this opposition could spark a deeper rift between Africa and the United States. If the confrontation remains confined to rhetoric, it may fade as a passing dispute. But if it escalates into broader policy shifts, such as Africa reducing cooperation with Washington, pivoting more decisively toward other partners, or even coordinating collective responses, it could mark a turning point in global geopolitics. Already, there are signs of change. Several African countries are accelerating discussions with China on new infrastructure loans, with Russia on energy and military cooperation, and with Middle Eastern states on investment in agriculture and technology. The symbolism of Africa being shut out of the U.S. while being courted by others only strengthens the perception that Washington is losing ground. In this context, Traoré's opposition is not isolated. It is part of a broader continental recalibration. The implications are profound. For the United States, alienating a region as dynamic and youthful as West Africa risks long-term damage to its global influence. Africa's population is projected to double in the coming decades, making it a hub of innovation, labor, and consumer demand. Excluding these nations today could mean losing access to tomorrow's opportunities. For Africa, however, the ban may act as a catalyst, accelerating the push for self-reliance and deeper South-South cooperation. It may also embolden leaders to resist Western pressures more openly, setting in motion a wave of diplomatic assertiveness not seen in decades. There are also humanitarian and social dimensions to consider. The travel ban disproportionately affects ordinary people rather than political elites. It penalizes students, workers, and families far more than governments. In this sense, the U.S. risks fostering resentment at the grassroots level, deepening the perception that its policies are guided by exclusion rather than partnership. Traoré has capitalized on this sentiment, framing his opposition not just as a matter of statecraft, but as a defense of ordinary Africans who have long been marginalized by global systems. His narrative taps into a sense of collective dignity, asserting that Africa deserves better than to be treated as a risk to be managed. Critics in the United States argue that the policy is short-sighted, undermining America's soft power and alienating future generations of African leaders. Universities, businesses, and cultural institutions within the U.S. have voiced concerns that the ban will limit the very exchanges that foster mutual understanding and trust. If American policymakers see Africa only through the lens of threat, they risk perpetuating cycles of misunderstanding and alienation that will not serve their long-term interests. Meanwhile, African civil society organizations, youth groups, and intellectuals are rallying behind Traoré's stance. They see in his defiance a rare example of leadership that refuses to bow to Western dictates. Protests and campaigns have emerged across multiple African capitals, demanding not only the lifting of the ban, but a re-evaluation of Africa's entire relationship with the West. The momentum generated by this opposition could evolve into a broader Pan-African movement, one that uses the travel ban as a rallying point to push for greater autonomy in global affairs. The possibility of a new rift between Africa and the United States raises pressing questions for both sides. Will Washington reconsider the policy in the face of mounting backlash, or will it double down in the name of security? Will Africa find ways to transform this moment of exclusion into an opportunity for unity and innovation? And will leaders like Traoré be able to sustain their defiance in the face of pressures that may include economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, or covert destabilization efforts? History suggests that the stakes are high. Whenever Africa has sought to chart its own course, it has faced resistance from established powers. Yet history also shows that moments of confrontation can give birth to new solidarities and creative alternatives. Traoré's opposition may well become one such moment. If Africa uses this crisis to invest in its own institutions, to deepen ties with sympathetic partners, and to strengthen continental cooperation, then the travel ban may ultimately backfire. accelerating the very independence it sought to constrain. The debate is far from over. Across Africa's cities and villages, conversations are unfolding about what this means for the future. For many, the ban has brought into sharp relief the urgency of building an Africa that no longer depends on the approval or access of foreign powers. For others, it has revealed the fragility of global trust, reminding them that policies in distant capitals can reshape lives in unexpected ways. In all of this, one truth stands out: Africa is no longer willing to remain silent, and leaders like Ibrahim Traoré are ensuring that silence is broken, that Africa's voice is heard, and that the world understands that exclusion will not be met with submission, but with defiance and resilience. As the dust settles, the clash between Traoré and Washington will be remembered not just as a dispute over visas, but as a chapter in the ongoing struggle over Africa's sovereignty in a shifting global landscape. Whether it sparks a rift or lays the groundwork for a new balance of power will depend on the choices made in the coming months. What is certain is that Africa has found in this moment both a challenge and an opportunity, and the world is watching closely to see which path it will take.